I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things.
There's no teams. There's no score. There's no team wearing red, another team wearing green as they go against each other for the championship game. No, these aren't teams. These are folks that are being killed on a mass scale, murdered, blown into pieces, and then their families have to pick up the rest of the remains of their lives and try and figure out how to go forward while still wondering if they're going to make it to the next day. But we got people talking about which team it was that did this and that. It's time to, as I mentioned yesterday, we go from punitive measures to preventative measures for many folks believing it. So when terrorists come in and kill tons of folks in Israel, as they did, a week and a half ago now, that sparked this latest mass murder scale thing. As that's happened, and those folks were dehumanized as well and talking about who they were, does it make any sense to then do it on a broader scale the other way? What are we accomplishing? Well, many times they say it out loud, but the protests are definitely still happening. I'll let you talk in there, Adrienne, after we see the protests in Israel's embassies, which I want to point out before we get to this. As people are talking about, whether or not you're for or against Israel, that's a country. There's people within it. How many of them are against it? I mean, Donald Trump was president of the United States. He did many things that many members and citizens in this country who did not vote for him, or maybe even many who did, were like, yo, that's not the leadership that I would like to see. I've seen some of these accounts from Israelis that are like, Netanyahu is a problem. It's not what we want to see. That's not the representation that we want. So the blanket statements about who is and who isn't for or against this, it's way more nuanced than we'd like to admit, because then we'd have to actually think more than just drop bombs. Here, let's watch some of these protests before we talk. And now we've got things like this. Last thoughts, Adrienne?
The observation you made about people wanting to create these monolithic ideals in their mind about these nations and whether they support them or I support this team or that team. Number one, that's really just treating people like sports. You can't just say, oh, I'm 100% behind this country. I'm not 100% behind the United States. I am behind people and ensuring that especially innocent people are not harmed. And I just did my weekly commentary for Straight Arrow News on this exact point, that when people are doing this, I'm 100% behind this team or that team, what they're doing is very reductive and it is not productive. And it creates a mentality where people are started to see in this monolithic, narrow focus that gets other people killed, just like the little boy who was murdered earlier, on this past weekend, because he's Muslim, he's from Palestinian heritage. It's that mindset that's drilled in of they're all this way or they all believe this, and we have to have this team mentality that's extremely dangerous. So I definitely recommend checking out my Straight Arrow News commentary on that. It drops every Wednesday. And the thing is we need people to have more mindsets of treating people like people as opposed to like in these countries like teams.
And I think it's always highlighted when people talk about, someone bring up something that's very important. Say it's even something that's maybe directly influenced here in American culture. Gun violence. Another school gets shot up and people go, we need to do something about these guns. This isn't the time to get political. What's political about loss of children's lives that are going about their normal day-to-day activities? There's nothing political about it. It only becomes political once people who are politicians do or don't do something in response to it that many times either make things worse or I think rare times make things better, because it's never the objective is never to focus on people. It's to focus on maybe their lives, their careers, their money, their corruption, who they owe something to, these affiliations, because if we don't come off looking this way, someone's going to start questioning that. And the third thing, so even as we see human rights violations, as people murdered in the streets and massacres happening like this, there's always a thought that's more important than these lives of these folks. We have to look a certain way, say a certain way, and do things another certain way, despite the fact that we're losing all these folks. Yes, they're humans. And we see some of the rhetoric that's coming from some of these folks, these leaders, and they're speaking like they're not human. The only way you can do things like this, as we've seen in any other kinds of massacres of humans on wide scale in human history, is to make sure that most folks that they can convince of this, that these people we're targeting, they're not humans. That's the thought process. We do it here and it happens everywhere else.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.